Virgin Most Powerful Radio, sharing the gospel with clarity and charity.
And now, Virgin Most Powerful Radio is pleased to present Hands-On Apologetics with renowned Catholic author and apologist, Gary Michuta.
Hands-On Apologetics. You have entered into Virgin Most Powerful's Apologetics Dojo, and it's great to be with you. It's hope everybody had a great weekend. It's great to be back in the dojo after the long wait. Anyway, let's see here. Richard, can you hear me now? There's no sound, huh? Okay, well, let's do a shout out to... That's strange. I don't know why. Okay, try it again. Can you hear me? Very strange. Okay. I turned my end up. How's this sound? Okay, sorry everybody. Anyway, it's great to be with you today because we got a great show in store for us for this program because it's September 21st, and that is the Feast of St. Michael the Evangelist and his Gospel. So we're going to have our good friend Steve Ray come on the show. We're going to talk about Matthew's Gospel and about... his life, and also about the structure of that gospel. So that's going to be a lot of fun. He's going to be coming up on the other side of the break. Hopefully, like I said, I know that having problems here in the dojo, hopefully this will work out fine. Also, as always, we have our Finding the Fallacy. Today's Finding the Fallacy is the false attribution fallacy. And also, we meet an early church father. Today's early church father, by the way, very, very important early church father, and a very interesting one indeed. It's Origen of Alexandria. So we could almost chop his segment into several parts, but I'm going to try to do it all on one part, because that's how we fly here in the dojo. Without further ado, let me give my shout-outs really quick to all of those watching on Facebook, YouTube, all the other platforms. Hello. Welcome aboard, everybody. And also, I want to welcome all of you listening around the United States via radio, and also all our good friends outside the country listening via podcast. Welcome aboard, everybody. Great to be with you. Just lots of things happening, and we don't want to miss a beat here, at the dojo. So you could always do apologetics. Apologetics can be done anywhere. I know a lot of people, like I said, were stationed in place, so you can always do apologetics stationed in place on social media. And so I want to thank everybody for subscribing. And if you haven't subscribed, I want to thank you in advance because that does help make us more visible. And by the way, share podcast, tell people about it, and share the things you learn here in the dojo. That's the whole purpose of this program. Is I want to help equip you so that you can share the faith with more confidence, more clarity, more charity. So anyway, I want to thank all of you for subscribing and doing that. And trust me, we're making an impact, and I truly appreciate it. Without further ado, why don't we jump into the Finding the Fallacy segment, which is the false attribution. And the false attribution, there's a couple of ways it could be used. False attribution could be a misattribution in general, and that's when a quotation or a work is accidentally, traditionally, or based on bad information attributed to either the wrong person or the wrong group. So a false attribution could be that you've quoted something that actually doesn't come from that particular person. sometimes in debates you'll find a debater calling their opponent on something that they may have quoted as coming from a particular early church father, when it turns out that that particular writing was spurious. It doesn't actually come from that individual. That was an inadvertent false attribution. There's also another one. A more specific fallacy is where the advocate appeals to irrelevant, unqualified, unidentified, biased, or fabricated source in support of an argument. So, in other words, it's just it's not that you've misattributed the evidence, but that the evidence that you did bring up simply is just not properly qualified to be brought up as evidence. It's either irrelevant, it's super biased, it's unidentified, or maybe even fabricated. And, this is a great warning for all people who are involved in apologetics. It is so easy, folks, to search through the internet, pick up even Catholic sites who will give all sorts of very interesting information, especially from the early church. And you'll think, wow, this is a slam dunk argument. I never heard it before. And use it, and it turns out it's wrong, or you can't trace the source, things like that. So as always, in apologetics, if you're going to be using resources, either use it from a source or resource that puts the effort in to verify the information, or verify it yourself. I mean, that's the beautiful thing about social media today and search engines is it only takes a couple of minutes and you can run down the source of a particular quotation. And it's funny, there's a lot of information out there. I know this, I'm sure you all will be shocked, but yes, there's a lot of information on the internet that is just totally false. It's fabricated. But still, because we serve He who is the way, the truth, and the life, truth is a person for us. To be honest to Christ, we need to be honest with our sources. So take that a little extra effort. Run down the sources. Make sure that the attributions are sound before you use it in arguments, because we do not want to mislead anybody. Okay, so that's our finding of the fallacy for today, the false attribution fallacy. Let's jump to the Meet the Early Church Father for today, who is Origen of Alexandria. Origen has more biographical details available than any other early theologians. Most of it comes from an entire 6th book of Eusebius's church history, which is devoted almost entirely to him. So you heard on this program over and over again, I'll say, well, very little or nothing is known about a particular writer. Well, when it comes to Origen, we have a plethora of information. He was born about the year 185 AD in Alexandria, the child of Christian parents, when his father, St. Leonidas, was martyred during the persecution of Septimius Severus in the year 202 AD. Origen's mother prevented him from accompanying his father to martyrdom by the simple expedient of hiding his clothes. It is generally stated that he castrated himself, probably soon after the death of his father, but the statements which lead to this conclusion are open to other interpretations, and the facts are far from certain. This is according to Jurgen's Faith of the Early Fathers. Jurgens continues, it was under the direction of Origen, successor to Clement, that the school of Alexandria reaches its greatest prominence. About 212 AD, journeyed to Rome, where he made the acquaintance of Hippolytus. He left Alexandria again in the year 215 AD, when the Emperor Caracalla was looting the city and persecuting its teachers. Going to Caesarea in Palestine, he preached to the congregation there on Scripture, although he was a layman, at the request of Theocristius, Bishop of Caesarea, and Alexander, the Bishop of Jerusalem. Demetrius, the Bishop of Alexandria, raised strong objections to Origen having been permitted to preach and demanded his return to Alexandria. 15 years later, Origen again passed through Caesarea on a journey to Greece. And in order to obviate any further objections to a layman being allowed to preach, Alexander and Theocrates, I'm not sure how to pronounce his name, ordained him to the priesthood. Now, Demetrius, the bishop of Alexandria, the bishop of his home see, was now quite thoroughly enraged by such a flagrant breach of canons, which apparently already demanded that a man be ordained only by the bishop of his diocese of residence. He called two synods in Alexandria in 230, 231 AD, which deposed, degraded, and excommunicated Origen, who then moved to Caesarea in Palestine, where he founded a school patterned after that of Alexandria. During the Diocletian persecution, he was tortured and imprisoned, most likely in Caesarea, with the result that of his sufferings he died entire at the age of 69 in 253 or 254 AD. Now, that's Origen's life. Now, what's interesting is Origen's teachings actually goes far beyond his lifetime. Jurgens continues the disputes known as the Origenist controversies in respect to the orthodoxy of his doctrine arose never during his lifetime, but 3 times after his death in AD 300, AD 400, and AD 450. He was a great scholar, a great theologian, and strove always to be Catholic in his faith, yet he came finally to be regarded as a heretic, which accounts largely from the fact that so many of his writings have perished entirely, while much of that is extant has suffered terribly at the hands of people who tried either to sanitize his writings to make them sound more orthodox, or people who tried to exaggerate Origen's eccentricities, such as Rufinus in the earlier case, and that's our early church father for today, Origen of Alexandria. Coming up on the other side of the break, Steve Ray. Stay tuned.
Hi, this is Jesse Romero from the Terry and Jesse Show, also from Jesus 911. Let's face it, we all need to use the internet, but we need screen accountability. Why? Pornography is a huge problem, especially on the internet. And every time we tap into the internet, we get bombarded with images and temptations that degrade our humanity. So we need Covenant Eyes to block these pornographic sites and advertisements from infiltrating our lives. Covenant Eyes helps us take custody of our eyes and custody of our intellect. So I recommend you go to covenanteyes.com and type in the promo code VMPR to support the network. Protect yourself and your family from the imminent threats on the internet. www.covenanteyes.com.
Did you know my mom's gonna have a baby? She is? Will it be a boy? Or will it be a girl? We don't know yet, but we heard the heartbeat and my dad said this is gonna be someone very special. You mean like being a president? Or maybe a doctor? Well, probably maybe like a singer or dancer, I think.
Hello, my name is Mary Ann Koharski. I'm the director of Pro-Life Across America. We know that every baby is a miracle and has the potential to do great things. If you know someone who is pregnant or in need of alternatives or assistance, or would like to support the work of Pro-Life Across America, please call 1-800-366-7773 or visit our website at prolifeacrossamerica.org. Pro-Life Across America is non-political and totally educational.
Pro-Life Across America, the Billboard people.
This is Terry Barber. I want to thank you for your support here at Virgin Most Powerful Radio. Here's an easy way to do it. If you're going to sell or buy a house, call Real Estate for Life, 877-543-3871, because they're going to get you a Christ-centered agent to purchase your home or to sell your home. And at the close of escrow, a portion of his commission goes right back to Virgin Most Powerful Radio. Call 877-543-3871. Thank you so much for your support.
Now, back to Hands on Apologetics with Gary Machuda. If you'd like to join the conversation, call 888-526-2151. Here's Gary.
And welcome back, everybody. Hands on Apologetics. And Origen's amazing early church father. It's worth maybe saying a couple minutes, a little bit more about him, because we do have an awful lot of his writings, although strangely enough, a lot of them were destroyed. We don't have them, but we still have a sizable amount, and he was certainly a brilliant theologian. As we're trying to contact Steve Ray, our guest, I'm going to talk a little bit more about Origen of Alexandria. Although, he's not a saint, even though he was martyred for the faith, largely not so much because of himself. It's true that he speculated and many times went over the bounds of orthodoxy. Origen, nevertheless, was a very holy person, and there are canonized saints in the church that do make mistakes, small mistakes, and nevertheless that doesn't impede them. But really, I think the problem that sunk Origen's ship was all the problems that his writings caused long after his death. And so unfortunately, in some ways, my heart kind of goes out to him, because he's an amazing thinker and writer. And also, his writings contain a lot that can be used to defend the faith. So anyway, check out his writings. Read it for yourself. And I hear that Steve Ray is available. And Steve, of course, is an extraordinary Catholic apologist, adventurer. His website is Catholic-convert.com or CatholicConvert.com. And he also does the Footprints of God pilgrimages. He's author of several books, Crossing the Tiber, Upon This Rock, and the latest, The Papacy, What the Pope Does and Why It Matters. And Steve, welcome to Hands on Apologetics.
Thank you very much, Gary. However, my newest book just came out. Is called The Catholic Faith in an Introduction to the Creeds.
Oh, excellent. Who's it from? Who's publishing it?
10 books. 10 books.
10
we had it published originally, another publisher, but the title wasn't good and the marketing cover wasn't good, so we redid it with 10, and it's a beautiful book, just a beautiful hardcover book, and it's all goes through the creeds, clause by clause. I wrote it together with Deacon Dennis Walters, and it's a beautiful book, so called The Catholic Faith, An Introduction to the Creeds. And a new one's coming out soon, hopefully, on Genesis.
Oh, really? Oh, wow. You've been busy. The COVID crisis hasn't slowed you down at all.
Oh, I've pretty much ignored that all.
Well, hey, today is September 21st, which is the feast of St. Matthew the Evangelist. So why don't we talk a little bit about St. Matthew?
Okay, I jokingly say happy feast day of the IRS, because Matthew was a tax collector. He was an IRS agent in Israel, and just like IRS agents are not our favorite people in this country, he was certainly not the favorite among his own people either. And so I jokingly say, welcome to the feast day of Matthew the IRS agent.
So they weren't popular back then either.
No, not popular. And especially him, because he is betraying his own people, which is really bad. In fact, Jesus often would say that when he said, if your brother doesn't, you go to your brother and he doesn't get straight with you, take 2 or 3, and if he still doesn't deal with his sin, take it to the church, and if he doesn't even listen to the church, then treat him as a tax collector and a sinner. So they were a pariah. They were a byword, I would even say. They were considered the worst of the worst. And the reason being, of course, is because even though he is a Jew, he is from the tribe of Levi. The word Jew, of course, means from the tribe of Judah. But loosely speaking, the Jews who were still in Judea after the Babylonian captivity, the ones who remained, were Jews. They're mainly from the tribe of Judah. That's where they get the name Jew in Judaism. But there were still a few other tribes mixed in, and they have some Levites still from that tribe. And interestingly, Paul is from the tribe of Benjamin, so there's another tribe that's spoken for. And Anna, who was at the temple, was from the tribe of Asher. when they came, when Jesus was a baby. So you still have a smattering of few remnants of the other tribes left. But Matthew is a Levite. And in fact, he has two names. One is Matthew and one is Levi, which shows that he's from that tribe. And what the worst thing that you could do to your people, Israel, to the Jews, is to conspire against them with Rome, the occupier. And for selfish and greedy reasons, someone like Matthew would collaborate with Rome, almost like somebody who spies on his own people. And he says, I'll tell you what, I'll collect taxes for you from my own people. But what they would do when they collected taxes is Rome would say maybe, let's say we need 1 million denarii for a year. You can charge as much as you want, and we'll back you. You can get 2 million. You can charge 2 million. We'll only take 1 million from you. You can make 1 million on your own. And so this is really a bad, evil, traitorous practice for one of your own people to become an agent of the Roman government, the occupiers, collecting taxes for Rome against your own people. Another one we know did that too. And he's in the Gospel of Luke, where he climbs a sycamore tree. And he also the same thing. What was his name? I forgot.
Zacchaeus, right?
Zacchaeus. My mind. Yeah. We're driving in a car from up north, so I'm a little distracted here. We're doing this while we're driving home. Actually, my wife's driving, but Zacchaeus. Actually, when we go to Israel, we always stop there and we look at a sycamore tree, and I read that passage about Zacchaeus, and we know they were rich because Zacchaeus says that he will give back half of my goods. I will give to the poor. And if I've defrauded anyone of anything, I will restore it fourfold. So imagine the money that Zacchaeus and Matthew had just from this traitorous activity of working and collaborating with the occupier Rome against their own people. So he was very much hated by his people.
Yeah. It's interesting. Zacchaeus throws that in, if I've defrauded anyone, as if, that would be a live option for tax collectors to defraud people.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
Oh, and we know they defrauded people because that's how they made their cut.
Yeah. Yeah, very good. So Matthew from the tribe of Levi wouldn't be the most likable person amongst the 12 as far as professions.
Oh, not at all. When you look at Jesus' 12 disciples, soon to become apostles, except for Judas, of course, they're really a motley crew of guys. And they are a wide variety of people, even political persuasions. You have Peter, Andrew, James, and John, who are just working guys, but they're businessmen. Peter had partners. James and John were his partners in Zebedee, and they also had hired laborers. So they were not poor themselves. They must have had a very good living. And when you look at Capernaum, you see that Peter's house is right next to the synagogue and right next to the harbor. So when you've got a city of 1,500 people that stretches out over 15 acres, and Peter lives right at the entrance of the synagogue and right at the shore where the boats are in the harbor, he's a very important civic figure. I'm going to be giving a talk on him next month for Legatus called Peter the First CEO. And he really was probably quite the astute businessman. And then you have other guys that are less so. You have Matthew, who is a traitor working for Rome as a tax collector. You have Judas, who's the only one from the south, down from the Jerusalem area, who's stealing the money and eventually betrays Jesus. He's a crook right from the beginning because he's been pilfering from their money bag from the beginning. And then you have Simon the Zealot, who is a warrior against Rome. He is one of those who is like a underground guerrilla fighter against Rome. He's a zealot, and they were actually fighting Rome. So Jesus has this really interesting collection of guys, and my guess is they had tremendous political arguments along the way, as well as socioeconomic differences. And Matthew, he's an outlier. He's a byword himself. And the very fact that Jesus would choose someone like him is very interesting. By the way, Capernaum, where he is and where Jesus is living, is between two provinces, Herod Archelaus and Herod Philip to the north, and it's right on the border. So there's a tax station. When you go between those two provinces, you have to pay a tax. If you're moving merchandise, you're going to have to pay a tax to move your merchandise. So who's sitting there at that tax booth on the Via Maris, the way by the sea, which is a very important thoroughfare between the north up and where you'd come in if you were coming in from Persia and where Iraq of today, Babylonia, you'd have to come down through there. You would go past Matthew's taxing station. Just imagine the traffic that he collected taxes from, and most hated and despised when yet Jesus goes up and says, "Follow me." A great painting by Caravaggio. I put a picture of it for you. I sent it to you, but people should look up The Call of Matthew by Caravaggio. And it's so interesting, this painting, because Matthew is seated at his tax booth right between the two provinces in Capernaum. And he lived in Capernaum, by the way, right with those Jews in Capernaum. Maybe a next-door neighbor to Peter and Jesus. And he's got the stack of gold coins. And Jesus walks in and points to him. And Matthew is looking at the gold coins and then at Jesus. You can see that there's a great look of consternation in his face. Am I willing to walk away from this pile of gold to follow this somewhat unknown rabbi? I don't know. And Jesus is holding his finger just like in the creation story of Michelangelo in the Sistine Chapel. Remember the one where God creates Adam, his fingers pointed, and then Adam kind of comes alive? Jesus is doing the same thing to Matthew. His fingers, it's Michelangelo is telling you Jesus is giving new life. He's creating something new here with Matthew. And he's saying, Matthew, will you walk away from your gold and have new life and follow and serve me? And the look on Matthew's face is just precious. So that's why this story takes place in Jesus' hometown. He left Nazareth and moved to Capernaum, and he lives with Peter. And even in the Gospels, it said Jesus' house. He lived there for 3 years, maybe next door to the IRS agent. And then one day, walking past his tax booth, he says, I want you to follow me. And there's Matthew making a very, very eternally significant decision, looking down at the gold and looking up at Jesus.
Wow. Yeah, and it's all providential, isn't it? That Matthew's collection area would just so happen to be located at that specific area with Jesus coming down from Nazareth.
Way, Jesus is no fool in picking where he was going to be his headquarters. Jesus was very strategic about this because it was a Jewish town. It was not the biggest Jewish town, but one of the most important. It had a Roman centurion who was stationed there. It had a tax collector. It was the main road.
Yeah, very good. We're chatting with Steve Ray about Matthew the Evangelist. Stay tuned, folks. More to come on the other side of the break.
Help the Helpless, a Minnesota St. Paul nonprofit organization chaired by Father of Tear and volunteers, is humbly asking you for your kind support to help the poor and the handicapped children in India and Ecuador. Through financial support from the Help of the Helpless benefactors, the children are provided with clothing, food, education, shelter, and the teachings of the Catholic Church. The mission is to help children thrive and become self-sufficient young adults leading productive lives. We also provide aid to poor families in Ecuador with food baskets, medicines, medical assistance, and help with funeral needs for the deceased. The work in India is done by Father Antonio's organization, St. Mary's. In Ecuador, the work is being done by the Servant Sisters of the Home of Mother. You can call us at 877-762-8857. To learn more, please visit our website, www.helpthehelpless.org. God bless you. Buying or selling your home or your business property? This is Terry Barber. Real Estate for Life underwrites the Terry and Jesse Show. And they can connect you to one of 900 pro-life real estate agents around the world. And when they receive their referral fee, they will give 80% of it to a pro-life organization. Wow! That's 80%! realestateforlife.org, 877-LIFE-US1.
This is Jesse Romero. You're listening to Hands-On Apologetics with Gary Machuda on Virgin Most Powerful Radio.
And welcome back, everybody. We are chatting with master apologist and a good friend of the show, Steve Ray, about Matthew. It's the Feast of St. Matthew the Evangelist, and Steve's giving us some awesome information about Matthew. And Steve, with the conversion of Zacchaeus, there was much rejoicing in Zacchaeus' house. It's interesting with Matthew also. Matthew throws a feast for Jesus, doesn't he?
He does, and this raises the ire of the Pharisees and those who not only would they be hostily against Matthew for betraying the people of God, as a priest no less, as from the priestly tribe of Levi, but also because he was considered, the Jews considered tax collectors just as evil as Gentiles. Someone does, if you can't get their problems, treat him as a tax collector or as a Gentile. And the Pharisees, the scribes, these people wouldn't even talk to Gentiles. They wouldn't talk to women or the people that worked on the land. They certainly wouldn't talk to a tax collector. And yet Jesus, Levi, while he's living in Capernaum, I just said earlier that he might even have been the next door neighbor to Peter and Jesus where they lived. Who knows, but maybe down the street a ways. 1,500 people lived in Capernaum, which was about 15 acres in size. It's a good-sized town then, but it wasn't as big as, say, Magdala, which is 40,000 people. But he went to eat with Matthew at his house. I'm just going to read this passage from Luke. Feast at his house. This is in the and many tax collectors, others were sitting at the table, kind of like birds of a feather.
Steve, you're breaking up,
yeah.
So why don't I read the passage, and then hopefully your connection will clear up by the time I'm done. Okay, Levi made a great feast in his house, many tax collectors and others sitting at table with him. Pharisees and their scribes murmured against his disciples, saying, "Why do you eat and drink with tax collectors and sinners?" And Jesus said, "Those who are well do not need a physician, but those who are sick. I have come not to call the righteous, but sinners to repentance." And that's Luke 5:29 through 32.
So I think I got a little better reception. Hopefully we're going in Upper Michigan here, and it might not be so good. Can you hear me now?
Oh, yeah, much clearer. Very good. That worked.
Okay, good. I'm hoping that it returns. Yes, Levi, birds of a feather flock together. So since he cannot associate with the religious Jews and the people of the village, he has his own bunch of tax collector buddies. And they had feasts. Well, they could afford a feast, couldn't they? They were stealing the money from everybody else. And Jesus then goes to eat with them. And that would be considered a betrayal of Jesus, that Jesus was lowering himself and becoming defiled, according to the ceremonial laws, by going and eating with these people who are considered just as bad or worse than the Gentiles. But it's interesting that Jesus said, well, you Pharisees, you're always trying to be so righteous, but these people are the ones that need help. They're the ones that need the doctor. And I came to heal the sick, to heal the sinner. So he goes and he eats with these people.
Yeah, very good. So, so Pharisees are up in arms, so to speak, with, how in the world could you do this, Jesus? You're supposed to be righteous.
Exactly, and this is what the Pharisees pull their hair out, because they were so self-righteous. Paul later, who is a Pharisee, says that I consider all of my self-righteousness. He writes to the Philippians about this, and it's interesting. In Philippi, when I take my groups there, by the way, I'm going to be taking a group on a St. Paul cruise in October this year. We're going to stop in Philippi, and I'm going to show them the public toilets. And in my movie on Paul, I'm sitting on those public toilets when I tell this little story. That Paul said, as a Pharisee, he was so self-righteous. He did everything. He said, according to the law, I was blameless. And these are the Pharisees, say. And he says, but now I consider all of my self-righteousness as refuse. But the Greek word means excrement. And so it's funny that I'm sitting on those toilets in Philippi when I make that comment. Actually, EWTN said I had to take that part out of the movie, and I refused to do it, and they allowed me to keep it in. But this is the Pharisees. They have this self-righteousness about them, and it's based on their efforts. And they see Jesus go in and speak to these sinners, tax collectors, even prostitutes he was known for. And he would drink with them and eat with them, which is something Pharisees and Jews could never do. They couldn't do that kind of thing. And they would say, Jesus, you go in and you drink. You're a drinker and a glutton going in with them. And they would accuse him of all of these things. But this was the self-righteousness of the Pharisees, and that's why Jesus always went after them, because they themselves could not even live up to their own standards, much less strapping it onto the backs of all the poor people. And they would also do everything they could to oppress the people. And Jesus is saying, come on, guys, lighten up. That's not what the kingdom of God is about.
Yeah, very good. It's interesting with Matthew that he's not part of the inner circle of Peter, James, and John. How does he fit in with the 12?
We're not told why Jesus has two favorites. Yeah. We read in the Gospel of John, the one whom Jesus loved, and most everybody agrees that that's the beloved Apostle John, who was probably the youngest of the band, probably a young teenager when he started following Jesus, who was already a follower of John the Baptist. It says that he was already a disciple with Andrew, a disciple of John the Baptist. And so he was already from a young age inspired by the coming Messiah, very faithful to the Jewish religion. And so he's a favorite, but I think Peter's also a favorite because Peter is so boisterous and he is so dedicated to Jesus, and he's willing to go out on a limb even if he can't live up to it. But then Jesus has three special, an inside circle, James, John, and Peter. And those three, he takes them up on the mountain of transfiguration alone, just those three, Peter, James, and John, and he takes them also to the Garden of Gethsemane to pray, leaves the others behind. But we don't know why he picked those three favorites, but they were his special inner circle. Then he had another one. So in almost every list, it goes this way. Peter is always last. In every list of the 12 in the Bible, you have Peter, which is first. That says something. And Judas Iscariot, which is last, which also says something. But you have Peter, Andrew, James, John, Philip, Bartholomew, Matthew, Thomas. So Matthew and Thomas are kind of always in the middle, like in number 8. Then you have a couple that we don't know much of, Simon the Zealot, Simon, son of Alphaeus, and lastly you've got Judas Iscariot. But Matthew is somewhere right in the middle, and he pretty much every list we have, no matter who gives it to us, Matthew is somewhere in the middle, and he is not one of Jesus' inner circle.
Yeah, that's... it's interesting that where he fits in the list, and also another thing too about Matthew. And correct me if I'm wrong, Steve, but let's see. We know where the apostles went after Pentecost. Of course, Peter and Paul go to Rome, St. Thomas to India. What happens to Matthew after the day of Pentecost?
There is some ambiguity about it. We know where his bones are. They ended up in Salerno, Italy. I've been there before to his tomb and venerated those bones in Salerno, Italy. But I'm just going to read a couple of paragraphs here. I'll read them quickly. I don't usually read things, but it gives a better summary than I could do just by spouting off here. But Eusebius of Caesarea, who wrote the first church history in 325, very, very significant to understanding the movements and the actions of the first 300 years of the church, states that Matthew preached to the fellow Jews, that he stayed mainly in the area of Israel Judea at the time and spoke to the Jews. And there's a reason for that, because Matthew's whole purpose, which we'll hopefully get to towards the end here, is to convince the Jews that Jesus is their Messiah. He took a very noble task with his gospel to teach the Jews that Jesus was their Messiah. That was his whole purpose. And so Matthew, even we have recorded that Matthew wrote his gospel first, not in Greek, but in Aramaic or Hebrew, the language of the Jewish people. So it says, Eusebius, the first church historian, said that he preached to his fellow Jews, but other traditions have him suffering martyrdom in Ethiopia, Persia, or Pontus. Now, those are three pretty wide-flung areas. Ethiopia is down beyond Egypt and Africa. Persia is over by Iraq of today, and Pontus is up in what we call Turkey of today. Now, there was a St. Paulinus, who was also early pilgrim and early writer, mentions that he ended his course in Parthia, which is Iraq or Iran. Another relates that he suffered martyrdom in a place called Nadabar. And according to Dorotheus, he was honorably interred in Heliopolis in Parthia, which is also over towards. So there seems to be a consensus that he went over towards Iraq and Iran of today. But his relics, a lot of times the early Christians, because of fighting and Muslims coming in, different things like that, they would steal the bones away and bring them to Italy, which was a very stable Catholic country. So they would bring them. So according to Pope Gregory VII, in a letter, said that the bones were interred now in Salerno, Italy, at 1080. So they've been kept there ever since. So for the last 1,000 years, we know where his bones have been. But you know, one of the interesting things, Gary, is it's so amazing. We don't even know a whole lot about Paul. We do know about Paul, what he did, and Peter, but so little. It would seem to us that these histories should have told us a lot more. Why doesn't the book of Acts tell us that Thomas went to India and that Matthew went to Parthia and over in the Persian area? I got a contention with Luke when I get to heaven. Why didn't you add a couple more chapters? What is the big deal about adding a couple more chapters to tell us where all these other guys went? But we can choose and pick and add from pieces of ancient history, the fathers of the church, secular history, and we can get somewhat of an idea, some more clearly than others. But Matthew is a little more obscure than the others.
Yeah, very good. Well, here's the music coming up. We are chatting with Steve Ray about St. Matthew the Evangelist and his gospel. And I think on the other side of the break, we're going to jump into his gospel. So you don't want to miss it. It's Hands On Apologetics. Stay tuned, folks.
We got Ernesto from Long Beach.
You know, I just wanted to comment, and I just wanted to thank you guys. And I kind of wanted to encourage people that are listening, maybe that are not donating, because honestly, I got to be honest. I used to think you guys were a little
too over the top.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's right.
If God gave us a lot, and I have the blessing of listening to all this, and I just want to call all the people. I got 5 kids, and I don't make a lot of money, and I'm still donating to you guys.
God bless you, brother. You're amazing.
We have to do this. We have to do the extra. And it's not even the extra. People see it like it's extra. Kneeling for communion, saying your rosary, saying the Divine Mercy Chaplet. It is not extra. It's what the church tells us to do.
Amen. You're a good man, brother.
30 years old, 29 years old, 5 kids, and I thank you guys. So everybody else, man, get on fire. Fight for the truth, man. I know what I'm telling you guys.
I love it.
Out there.
If you shop on Amazon.com, there's an easy way to support Virgin Most Powerful Radio. Just visit smile.amazon.com and type in Catholic Resource Center under the desired charity. Now, when you log into your Amazon account and purchase products, a portion of it will automatically go to support Virgin Most Powerful Radio at no cost to you. Thanks in advance for supporting CRC and VMPR, and may God richly bless you and your family.
Buying or selling your home or your business property? This is Terry Barber. Real Estate for Life underwrites the Terry and Jesse Show. And they can connect you to one of 900 pro-life real estate agents around the world. And when they receive their referral fee, they will give 80% of it to a pro-life organization. Wow! That's 80%! realestateforlife.org, 877-LIFE-US1.
Now, back to Hands-On Apologetics with Gary Machuda. If you'd like to join the conversation, call 888-526-2151. Here's Gary.
And welcome back, everybody. And if you love Scripture, you love today's feast day. It's the feast day of St. Matthew, and you love our guest, Steve Ray, who, he dives into the Bible like no one else. And Steve, I love all four Gospels, but I have a soft spot for the Gospel of Matthew.
And I have a soft spot for the Gospel of John because I wrote a 450-page book on it, but also because it's unique. But these, is the music coming back up again?
Yeah, that's just a technical difficulty.
Okay.
There we go. Okay, we're set.
All right, so I love the Gospel of John. That's my favorite. But Matthew, all four Gospels, just a quick summary, all four Gospels have their own authors, their own audience, their own purpose. And just dealing with it, like, say, for example, the birth of Christ, the nativity, or the beginning stories, okay? Matthew and Mark are opposites. Matthew presents Jesus as the king. Mark presents him as the servant. So what do we see as far as genealogy goes? Matthew takes him all the way through David, the king, all the way back to Abraham, showing the lineage of Jesus goes all the way back to kingship. And in Mark, there is no genealogy at all. Jesus just starts doing miracle. Why? Because he's a servant, and who cares what the genealogy of a servant is? It doesn't matter. Then you have the other two Gospels, Luke and John, who are also opposites. Luke portrays him as the ideal man. John portrays him as God. So look at the two genealogies. In Luke, it goes all the way back to Adam. It shows Jesus' lineage all the way back. He is truly man. In John's Gospel, he's presented as God, and the genealogy goes like this. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God, and the Word became flesh and dwelt among us. So the genealogy is that Jesus is eternally existing with the Father from all of eternity. So each Gospel has its own nativity story, or the beginnings, but each one also has its purpose. I won't go through all the other ones, but Matthew, his is placed first in the New Testament, I think because it's a bridge between the Old and the New Testament. Matthew quotes or alludes to the Old Testament over 65 times. Excuse me, that's way more than the others because he's using the Jews' own Old Testament book to convince them that this Jesus, this curly-haired Jewish guy walking around named Yeshua, is the fulfillment of the Old Testament king, prophet, priest, and he is the Messiah, the coming one. And that is Matthew's whole purpose, is to convince. That's why he wrote to the Jewish people, and probably according to the early writers, he wrote it first in Hebrew or Aramaic, in the language of the Jews, and it was later translated into Greek, although no one has ever found any manuscripts of it in Aramaic or Greek or Hebrew that I know of. So Matthew is quoting from the Old Testament, alluding to it. 25% of the words in Matthew's Gospels are words directly from Jesus' mouth. In other words, I like the red letter edition of the Bible, which shows all of Jesus' words in red. Mm-hmm. So when you read that Gospel, 25% of the words are in red. They're the words of Jesus himself. It's the second longest gospel, even though it has 28 chapters, and Luke only has 24. Luke's chapters are much longer than Matthew's, and according to the number of words, Luke's gospel is longer than Matthew's. In fact, Luke's is the longest book of the New Testament, the Gospel of Luke, but Matthew is the second longest gospel, presenting Jesus as the King and Messiah who is to come, the fulfillment of the Old Testament.
Yeah, wow. Those were, it definitely was marathon Bible studies because it just goes on and on. But it's fascinating, though. Now, Matthew has some peculiar themes to himself. Like you already mentioned that he's the Messiah King. That is so prominent in Matthew. Are there other themes as well?
Well, going back to Abraham, he's showing the pedigree of Jesus. The pedigree, your father's 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 father, is important to the Jews. They kept track of their genealogy, and they could trace it all the way back, most of them, really far back. And so what Matthew does is traces Jesus' genealogy all the way back to Abraham, to show that he is right there from the beginning of the covenant with the old people. Jesus is a descendant of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, also of David and Solomon, and all the way down, he becomes in the line of Judah by the legal adoption of Joseph, who is from that tribe, of the kingly tribe of Judah. So you see that trajectory all the way back. Another interesting thing is the word Levi. This is a fun fact. Levi was the priestly line, and a lot of Jews today have the last name of Cohen, Cohen. Cohen is the Hebrew word for priest. So if you have a Jewish friend whose last name is Cohen, it means priest. And when they've done genealogical studies on many of these who are last name is Cohen, the DNA tests, it all seems to go back to an original family. So that even the people today who are called Cohen, very, very likely that their genealogy goes all the way back to Moses, to Aaron's son Levi, which would make Moses their uncle. But that would, interestingly enough, and he is from the tribe of Levi. He is also then a Cohen from the priestly line, and he should have been doing priestly services instead of ripping people off by working for Rome collecting taxes.
Yeah, that's a really good point because, the Levites, they probably were most likely literate because they had to read scripture and, for sacrifices, things like that. And that would be, that literacy would be a great transition into the occupation of tax collector because you have to be literate, you have to be good with numbers.
But it would also be a good transition to become an apostle of Jesus who's going to write a gospel and who's now going to go out and proclaim the good news. And you're going to need, and the Cohen, the priest, the Levite, would also have to have a very good memory because these guys had large swaths of the Old Testament memorized and the tradition, which was never written down, of how things were done in the temple that were never written down, but you had to know them by rote, and their fathers would have taught them that by rote. And so, yes, he would have been very well adept at coming back to the Jews to teach them that Jesus is their Messiah, being one who is a priest himself, at least according to his lineage. Now, one of the things I wanted to make sure we squeeze in here, Gary, is that I was thinking of the Jerry and Jesse show. But Gary, and one of the things to remember here is that Matthew presents Jesus throughout as the new Moses, the fulfillment of Moses. Even at the Mount of Transfiguration, Moses is there on the mountain. Moses was on the first mountain, wasn't he? Mount Sinai. Now he's on the new mountain, and where Jesus is. And he's, I think, handing on the torch to Jesus. Him and Elijah. Moses represents the law. Elijah represents the prophets. The Old Testament was called the law and the prophets. So you have these two guys representing the Old Covenant. They're there on Mount Transfiguration to hand the baton on to Jesus and say, we brought it up this far, you take it the rest of the way. Jesus is the new Moses. He's taking over, so to speak. He's fulfilling. In Deuteronomy 18, it says twice that I will raise up a prophet from among your people. He will come from among your own people. And when he comes, listen to him. Not one of the prophets, but the prophet. And when he comes, listen to him. Well, that's what happens on Mount Sinai. Moses is there, and the new Moses is there, and God himself quotes Deuteronomy 18. He said, this is my beloved son. And remember I said in Deuteronomy 18, when he comes, listen to him? Well, this is him. Listen to him. So you have now, but Matthew is presenting being succeeded now by Jesus. And in Matthew's Gospel, chapter 23, it says that the scribes and the Pharisees sat on the chair of Moses, therefore do whatever they tell you. Well, Jesus is now becoming the new one. He's now taking that over. And the way you really see it really beautifully done is at the beginning of Matthew's Gospel, chapter 5, 3 whole chapters where Jesus is reinterpreting the law of Moses. And that's because he is the new Moses who is coming to reinterpret it. And it says that Jesus went up a mountain, and he sat, and he taught the people. When I'm up on Mount of Beatitudes with our groups, I always say, who else went up a mountain and then sat and taught the people? Moses. Exactly. So you are supposed to read this as Jesus now, as the new Moses, goes up the mountain, and he sits. In Exodus 18, it says that Moses took his seat. He sat, and he judged the people. Jesus now is going up the mountain. He sits, and he also judges and teaches the people. And he starts out by saying, if your law says this, but I tell you this. He's reinterpreting the whole law of Moses, portraying himself. Matthew is portraying him now as the new Moses, the fulfillment, the one who is to come, the one who you're supposed to listen to.
Wow. Yeah, that's beautiful. So he goes up a mountain. He also he does a lot of other things. I mean, Moses institutes the Passover. Jesus institutes the Passover.
He does the same thing, yep.
Yeah, I mean, it goes on and on. That's beautiful. I never tied Deuteronomy to the Transfiguration for some reason. I really appreciate that. That's the whole
point of it, because everything at the Transfiguration is tied to Mount Sinai. Jesus' face turning white, like Moses' face turning white. There was a cloud over Mount Sinai. There's a cloud over Mount Transfiguration. You see the Trinity there. You see God the Father's voice. The cloud represents the Holy Spirit, and Jesus is the second person. Everything that happens on the Mount of Transfiguration relates back to Mount Sinai. Even when Peter says, let's build booths for Moses and Elijah. Why? Because it was the time of the Festival of Booths, which at Sinai, they were commanded that from now on you have to build booths and take a week for the Festival of Booths. Even the fact that Peter says that at Mount Transfiguration ties it in to the book of Deuteronomy and Mount Sinai.
Beautiful, beautiful. Well, hey, Steve, where can people go to get a hold of your stuff and also sign up for pilgrimages?
CatholicConvert.com. And I'm happy to announce that this year was a bust for pilgrimages. But next year we have 5 going to Israel, 1 St. Paul cruise following St. Paul through Turkey and Greece and the Mediterranean. We have a Lourdes and Fatima in Ireland. Go to CatholicConvert.com. All the new brochures are up for next year.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Steve. We appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thank you, Gary. Keep up the good work.
Thanks. And that's CatholicConvert.com. Check it out, folks. He's got awesome stuff and great pilgrimages. Man, the hour is flowing. Can't believe it. But coming up next, we have the Terry and Jesse Show. So stay tuned. Thank you so much for listening. God willing, we'll be back again tomorrow to do this thing we know, Hands on Apologetics. Bye-bye, everybody.
In the 1990s, I lived and worked in Hollywood. But when my wife Betty's mom took ill, we relocated to Orange County. And it was during this time in our lives that I converted to Catholicism. Once my eyes were opened to the truth, I couldn't learn enough about the faith. But I had less free time than ever, especially with a long commute. That's when I discovered the real value of Catholic audio. Listening to cassette tapes transformed my daily commute into a miniature retreat. And that's the beauty of Virgin Most Powerful Radio today. Since the podcasts are archived, you can listen anytime on our smartphone app. I know how listening to Catholic audio can bring you closer to Christ and His Church. So I encourage you to visit the App Store or go to vmpr.org and download the app today. It just might change your life. I'm Matthew Arnold for Virgin Most Powerful Radio.